today we're going to focus mostly on AI because it's such an exciting thing and, people are also concerned. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you so much for having me.
I was privileged to see your work as it evolved, and I was very skeptical. Like, I did not expect ChatGPT to get so good. And it blows my mind. And we don't really understand the encoding that, we know the numbers, we can watch it multiply, but the idea of where is Shakespearean encoded, do you think we'll gain an understanding of the representation?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
Trying to do this in a human brain is very hard. You could say it's a similar problem, which is there are these neurons, they're connected, the connections are like moving, and we're not going to like slice up your brain and watch how it's evolving. But this we can perfectly X-ray. And there has been some very good work on interpretability, and I think there will be more over time. So yeah, I think we will be able to understand these networks, but our current understanding is low. The little bits we do understand have, as you'd expect, been very helpful in improving these things. So we're all motivated to really understand them, scientific curiosity aside. But the scale of these is so vast, and it is, we could also say where in your brain is Shakespeare encoded and how's that represented?
Yeah, we don't know.
We don't really know. But it somehow feels like even less satisfying to say we don't know yet in these like masses of numbers that we're supposed to be able to perfectly X-ray and watch and do any test we want on.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure within the next 5 years we'll understand it. And in terms of both training efficiency and accuracy, that understanding would let us do far better than we're able to do today.
100%. You see this in a lot of the history of technology where someone makes an empirical discovery. They have no idea what's going on, but it clearly works. And then as the scientific understanding deepens, they can make it so much better.
Yeah, no, in physics, biology, It's sometimes just messing around, and it's like, whoa, how does this actually come together?
In our case, we had, someone that was the guy that built GPT-1 sort of did it off by himself and saw this, and it was somewhat impressive. But no deep understanding of how it worked or why it worked. And then we got these scaling laws where we could predict how much better it was going to be. That was why when we told you we could do that demo, we were pretty confident it was going to work. We hadn't trained the model, but we were pretty confident. And that has led us to a bunch of attempts and better scientific understanding of what's going on. But it really came from a place of empirical result first.
When you look at the next 2 years, what do you think some of the key milestones will be?
Multimodality will definitely be important.
Which means speech in, speech out?
Speech in, speech out, images, eventually video. Clearly, people really want that. We launched images and audio, and it had a much stronger response than we expected. We'll be able to push that much further. But maybe the most important areas of progress will be around reasoning ability. Right now, GPT-4 can reason in only extremely limited ways, and also reliability. If you ask GPT-4 most questions 10,000 times, one of those 10,000 is probably pretty good, but it doesn't always know which one. And you'd like to get the best response of 10,000 each time. So that'll be that increase in reliability will be important. Customizability and personalization will also be very important. People want very different things out of GPT-4, different styles, different sets of assumptions. We'll make all that possible. And then also the ability to have it use your own data. So the ability to know about you, your email, your calendar, how you like appointments booked, connected to other outside data sources, all of that. Those will be some of the most important areas of improvement.
In the basic algorithm right now, just feed forward, multiply. So, to generate every new word, it's essentially doing the same thing. I'll be interested if you ever get to the point where, like solving a complex math equation where you might have to, apply transformations an arbitrary number of times, that the control logic for the reasoning may have to be quite a bit more complex than just what we do today.
At a minimum, it seems like we need some sort of adaptive compute. Right now we spend, the same amount of compute on each token, a dumb one, or like figuring out some complicated math
Yeah,
graph.
when we say do the Riemann hypothesis,
That deserves a lot of
it's
compute.
the same compute as saying the.
Right. So at a minimum, we've got to get that to work. We may need much more sophisticated things beyond it.
You and I were both part of a Senate education session, and I was pleased that I think about 30 senators
Yeah.
came to that. And, helping them get up to speed, since it's such a big change agent, I don't think, we could ever say we did too much to draw the politicians in. And yet, when they say, oh, we blew it on social media, we should do better. Social media, that is an outstanding challenge, that there are very negative elements to that in terms of polarization. And, even now, I'm not sure how we deal with that.
I don't understand why the government was not able to be more effective around social media, but it seems worth trying to understand as a case study for what they're going to go through now with AI.
No, it's a good case study. And when you talk about the regulation, is it clear to you what sort of regulations would be constructive?
I think we're starting to figure that out. It would be very easy to put way too much regulation on this space. And, you can look at lots of examples of where that's happened before. But also, if we are right, and we may turn out not to be, but if we are right and this technology goes as far as we think it's going to go, it will impact society, geopolitical balance of power, so many things that for these still hypothetical but future extraordinarily powerful systems, not like GPT-4, but something with 100,000 or 1,000,000 times the compute power of that, we have been socializing the idea of a global regulatory body that looks at those super powerful systems because they do have such global impact. And one model we talk about is something like the IAEA. So for nuclear energy, we decided the same thing. This needs a global agency of some sort because of the potential for global impact. I think that could make sense. There'll be a lot of shorter term issues of what are these models allowed to say and not say? How do we think about copyright? Different countries are going to think about those differently, and that's fine.
Some people think, okay, if there are models that are so powerful, we're scared of them. The reason nuclear regulation works globally is basically everyone, at least on the civilian side, wants to share safety practices, and it has been fantastic. When you get over into the weapons side of nuclear, you don't have that same thing. And so if the key is to stop the entire world from doing something dangerous, you'd almost want global government, which, today for many issues like climate, terrorism, we see that it's hard for us to cooperate. And people even invoke sort of US-China competition to say why any notion of slowing down would be inappropriate. So isn't it going to be hard any idea of slowing down or going slow enough to be careful will be hard to enforce?
Yeah, I think if it comes across as asking for a slowdown, that'll be really hard. If it instead says, okay, do what you want, but any compute cluster above a certain extremely high power threshold, and given the cost here, we're talking maybe 5 in the world, something like that, any cluster like that has got to submit to the equivalent of international weapons inspectors. And the model there has to be made available for safety audit, pass some tests during training and before deployment. That feels possible to me. I wasn't that sure before, but I did a big trip around the world this year, talked to heads of state in many of the countries that would need to participate in this, and there was like almost universal support for it. So I think that's not going to save us from everything. There are still going to be things that are going to go wrong with much smaller scale systems. In some cases, probably pretty badly wrong. But I think that can help us with the biggest tier of risks.
I do think AI, in the best case, can help us with some
For sure.
hard problems, including polarization, because potentially that breaks democracy, and that would be a super bad thing. Right now, I guess we're looking at a lot of productivity improvement from AI, which that's overwhelmingly a very good thing. Which areas are you most excited about?
Yeah. So first of all, I always think it's worth remembering that we're just sort of on this long continuous curve. So like right now we have AI systems that can do tasks. They certainly can't do jobs, but they can do tasks, and there's productivity gain there. Eventually, they'll be able to do more things that we think of like a job today. And we'll, of course, find new jobs and better jobs. And I totally believe that if you give people way more powerful tools, it's not just they can work a little faster, they can do qualitatively different things. And so, right now, maybe we can speed up a programmer 3x. It's about what we see. I mean, that's one of the categories that we're most excited about. It's working super well. But if you make a programmer 3 times more effective, it's not just that they can do 3 times more stuff. It's that they can, at that higher level of abstraction, using more of their brain power, they can now think of totally different things. And it's like, going from punch cards to higher level languages didn't just let us program a little faster, it let us do these qualitatively new things. And we're really seeing that. And so as we look at these next steps of things that can do a more complete task, you can like imagine a little agent that you can say, go write this whole program for me. I'll ask you a few questions along the way, but it won't just be writing a few functions at a time. That'll enable a bunch of new stuff. And then again, it'll do even more complex stuff. Someday, maybe there's an AI where you can say, go start and run this company for me. And then someday there's maybe an AI where you can say, like, go discover new physics. And it's the stuff that we're seeing now is very exciting and wonderful. But I think it's worth always putting it in context of this technology that at least for the next 5 or 10 years will be on a very steep improvement curve. These are the stupidest the models will ever be. But coding is probably the single area from a productivity gain we're most excited about today. Massively deployed and at scaled usage at this point. Healthcare and education are 2 things that are coming up that curve that we're very excited about too.
But the thing that is a little daunting is, unlike previous technology improvements, this one could improve very rapidly, and there's kind of no upper bound. I mean, the idea that it achieves human levels on a lot of areas of work, even if it's not doing unique science, it, can do support calls and sales calls. I guess you and I do have some concern, along with this good thing, that it'll force us to adapt faster than we've had to ever before.
That's the scary part. It's not that we have to adapt. It's not that humanity is not super adaptable. We've been through these massive technological shifts, and a massive percentage of the jobs that people do can change over a couple of generations. And over a couple of generations, we seem to absorb that just fine. We've seen that with the great technological revolutions of the past. Each technological revolution has gotten faster, and this will be the fastest by far. And that's the part that I find potentially a little scary, is just the speed with which society is going to have to adapt and that the labor market will change.
One aspect of AI is robotics, or blue-collar jobs, when you get sort of hands and feet that are at human-level capability. And the incredible Chat GPT breakthrough has kind of gotten us focused on the white-collar thing, which is super appropriate. But I do worry people are losing the focus on the blue-collar piece. So how do you see robotics?
Super excited for that. We started robots too early. And so we had to put that project on hold. It was hard for the wrong reasons. It wasn't helping us make progress with the difficult parts of the ML research. And, we were like dealing with bad simulators and breaking tendons and things like that. And also we realized more and more over time that what we really first needed was intelligence and cognition. And then we could figure out how to adapt it to physicality. And it was easier to start with that with the way we've built these language models. But we have always planned to come back to it. We've started investing a little bit in robotics companies. I think on the physical hardware side, there's finally, for the first time that I've ever seen, really exciting new platforms being built there. And at some point, we will be able to use our models, as you were saying, with their language understanding and future video understanding to say, all right, like, let's do amazing things with a robot.
But if the hardware guys, who've done a good job on legs actually get the arms, hands, fingers piece, and then we couple it, and it's not ridiculously expensive, that could change the job market for a lot of the blue-collar type work pretty rapidly.
Certainly the prediction, like the consensus prediction, if we rewind 7 or 10 years, was that the impact was going to be blue collar work first, white collar work second, creativity maybe never, but certainly last, because that was magic and human. Obviously, it's gone exactly the other direction. And I think there's like a lot of interesting takeaways about why that happened. Creative work, actually, the hallucinations of the GPT models is a feature, not a bug. It lets you discover some new things. Whereas if you're, having a robot move heavy machinery around, you better be really precise with that. And I think this is just a case of you've got to follow where technology goes, and you have preconceptions, but sometimes the science doesn't want to go that way.